All right, so today we're diving into something I find super interesting, Finland. They're always at the top of that World Happiness Report, right? And I think a lot of people, myself included, are curious, like, what's their secret? What are they doing over there? Maybe there are some things we can learn from them, apply to our own lives.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to use this podcast episode. It's called Why Finland is Always the Happiest Country, and kind of use that as a jumping off point for our discussion today.
Sounds good.
So one thing that stood out to me right away is that it's not just about, like, money. I think there's this assumption that, oh, Finland must be rich. That's why they're happy.
Right.
But they actually score highly in, like, all these other areas, too.
Yeah, you're right. It's pretty striking when you look at the World Happiness Report. They measure things like social support, healthcare, freedom, generosity, trust, even how corrupt people perceive their government to be.
Wow. So it's like a whole bunch of factors?
Exactly. And Finland is doing well in almost all of them. It really highlights that happiness is about way more than just how much money you have.
Definitely. So it sounds like their foundation for well-being is pretty strong. What exactly makes so supportive, in your opinion?
Well, their welfare state is a big part of it. They have universal health care. Education is free all the way through university.
Really? All the way through?
All the way through. It's pretty amazing. These things create a safety net that most countries just don't have. It allows people to, take risks, pursue their passions without that constant fear of financial ruin if things don't work out.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like if your basic needs are met, you're free to kind of explore and grow, right?
Exactly.
And it seems like they really value family, too, which probably contributes to well-being.
Oh, absolutely. They have generous parental leave policies, affordable child care.
Makes a huge difference.
It really does. They understand that supporting families benefits everyone in the long run.
It's like investing in the future, right? Okay, so we've got the strong safety net, a focus on family. But what about work? Because, let's be honest, most of us spend a lot of time working.
Right. Well, this is another area where Finland stands out.
Yeah.
They actually work fewer hours on average compared to a lot of other developed countries.
Wait, seriously. Less work and more happiness. That's a concept I can get behind.
They also have a really strong culture of taking vacations and spending time with family and friends. It's built into their system.
So it's not just about working less, but also prioritizing the things that actually matter.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between work and life. And they seem to have figured out a pretty good formula.
I'm starting to get a little jealous over here.
Yeah.
But let's talk about their education system for a minute. I've heard it's very different from what many of us are used to.
Oh, it definitely is. They focus on holistic learning, creativity, collaboration, instead of just rote memorization and standardized tests.
I've heard their kids have less homework and spend less time in school, too.
Yeah, it's true. And yet, they consistently perform well on international tests. It kind of challenges the notion that more is always better when it comes to education.
So they're not just churning out robots, they're actually developing well-rounded individuals.
Right. They recognize that a child's well-being is just as important as their academic performance. It's a really refreshing perspective.
It is. Okay, so we've talked about their social systems, their focus on family and well-being. But there's also this cultural element that seems to play a big role, right? This concept of Sisu.
Ah, yes, Sisu. It's a hard one to translate directly, but it basically encompasses this spirit of resilience and perseverance that the Finns are known for.
Like grit, but maybe a little deeper than that.
Yeah, it's more than just grit. It's about facing challenges head-on, but with this kind of quiet courage, this inner strength.
It sounds almost stoic in a way.
It does have that element to it. It's about accepting what you can't control and focusing on what you can.
And it's not just some abstract idea, right? It's woven into their history, their national identity.
Exactly. I mean, think about how Finland bounced back from their severe economic recession in the 90s. They did it through innovation, community support, and that unwavering Sisu spirit.
So it's a cultural value that's actually helped them overcome real-world obstacles.
Absolutely. It allows them to stay grounded and content, even in the face of difficulties.
And speaking of facing things head-on, there's another aspect of their culture that always fascinates me, their level of social trust.
Oh, yes. We've all seen those pictures of babies left in strollers outside cafes.
It's like something out of a movie, You would never see that in most places.
Right. It speaks volumes about their deep-seated trust in each other and in their society as a whole.
It's like this unspoken understanding that everyone's looking out for one another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this trust extends to their institutions as well. They have a high level of confidence in their government, in their public services.
It's like they believe the system is actually designed to support them, which sadly isn't always the case in other countries.
Right. And this sense of trust creates a sense of security and stability, which, as we've seen, are crucial for overall well-being.
So we've talked about the safety net provided by the government, the focus on holistic education, the cultural value of Sisu, and this incredible level of social trust. But there's one more element that seems intrinsically tied to Finnish happiness, their connection to nature.
You're absolutely right. Finland is a country of vast forests, thousands of lakes. They have this deep reverence for nature that's ingrained in their culture.
It's not just about enjoying the scenery, is it? It seems like nature plays a much deeper role in their lives.
Definitely. It's a source of solace, inspiration, rejuvenation. Something like 90% of Finns believe that being in nature is important for their well-being.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement.
It is. And it's reflected in their everyday lives, from the way they design their cities to their love of spending time outdoors, hiking, foraging for berries and mushrooms, swimming in the lakes.
Oh, and we can't forget about the saunas. That seems like the ultimate expression of their connection to nature.
Ugh. The saunas. Yes, absolutely. It's such a quintessential part of Finnish culture.
I read that there are over 3 million saunas in Finland.
More saunas than cars.
It's amazing. It's like this ritual of cleansing and relaxation, a way to connect with oneself and with nature.
And with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Saunas are often a social activity, a place to gather with friends and family.
Yeah, it's like this microcosm of all the things we've been talking about. Connection to nature, social bonding, a focus on well-being.
It's a beautiful tradition.
It really is. So I think we've covered a lot of ground already in this deep dive, from government policies and social structures to cultural values and even the embrace of nature and saunas.
We have.
And I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this fascinating topic.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much more to explore. Welcome back to our deep dive into Finnish happiness.
I'm ready for more.
We've laid some groundwork, talked about their social systems, that deep connection with nature, but now I think it's time to go a little deeper,
Yeah, get into those cultural nuances that make Finland so unique.
Exactly. And one thing that really stands out, that we touched on earlier, is this idea of trust.
Yeah, the trust thing is huge. It's hard to wrap your head around, honestly, coming from a culture where, we're a little more suspicious, maybe.
It's really woven into the fabric of Finnish society, though. Think about it. Leaving babies unattended outside cafes, that's just one example.
It's crazy when you think about it.
But it goes beyond that. It's a deeper belief in the honesty and reliability of other people.
So it's like interpersonal trust, but it also extends to their institutions, right?
Exactly. They have a high level of confidence in their government, in their public services.
It's like they actually believe the system is there to help them, not work against them.
Yeah, there's not that same sense of us versus them that you often see in other countries.
It makes you wonder, if that frees up mental space for other things. Like if you're not constantly battling the system, maybe you have more energy to focus on personal growth, your community, things like that.
That's a really interesting point. And you see that reflected in other areas of Finnish life, too. Like you have a strong sense of civic duty. People are actively involved in their community.
And volunteering, participating in local politics, that kind of thing.
Exactly. There's a sense of collective responsibility that you don't always find elsewhere. And it's all tied back to that foundation of trust.
It's like they understand that individual well-being is connected to the well-being of the whole.
Right. They're not just striving for individual happiness, but for collective well-being.
Which makes sense. When you think about it. If everyone around you is struggling, it's hard to be truly happy yourself.
Exactly. And you see that reflected in their approach to equality as well.
Oh, yeah. Finland is known for being very egalitarian.
They have one of the lowest levels of income inequality in the world. And it's not just about money. It's about equality of opportunity across the board.
Gender equality, access to education, healthcare.
All of that.
Yeah.
They understand that a society can only truly thrive when everyone has a chance to reach their full potential.
And that benefits everyone in the long run.
Exactly. It creates a more stable, more harmonious society. And, speaking of harmony, we can't forget about that deep connection they have with nature.
It's always coming back to nature with the Finns, isn't it?
Well, it's such a fundamental part of their culture, their identity even.
We talked about the forests, the lakes, the saunas, but it's more than just enjoying the scenery, right?
Right. It's about recognizing that we're part of something larger than ourselves.
Like a sense of interconnectedness.
Exactly. And nature provides that in a way that nothing else can. It's a source of peace, of perspective, of grounding.
And I think they've done a good job of integrating that into their everyday lives, too.
Oh, absolutely. From the way they design their cities to their love of foraging, spending time outdoors.
Even their environmental policies reflect that respect for nature.
Yes, they're very committed to sustainability. They understand that their well-being is intrinsically linked to the health of the planet.
So it's not just about taking from nature, it's about living in balance with it.
Exactly. It's a beautiful concept,
Yeah.
and one that I think we can all learn from.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for that kind of holistic approach to well-being.
It's about recognizing that all these things are interconnected.
Mm.
Our social structures, our cultural values, our relationship with nature, and even our own personal choices and actions.
It's like a big puzzle, and Finland seems to have found a way to fit all the pieces together.
They have. And, it's inspiring to see because it shows us that there are other ways of doing things, other ways of living.
That maybe, just maybe, there's a path to a happier, healthier, more fulfilling way of life, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
Okay, so we've spent the last two parts of this deep dive really getting into the nuts and bolts of Finnish happiness. But, I think the big question everyone is asking is,
Yeah.
can we actually, learn from this? Because it's one thing to admire Finland. It's another to figure out how to,
Right.
make it work for us.
Yeah, it's easy to say, oh, that's Finland, and just sort of dismiss it. But I think
That's our special. Yeah, but I do think there are, universal truths there, about well-being, about how we structure our lives that we can learn from.
So for someone listening who's like, okay, I'm inspired, but now what? Where do they even begin?
I think a good starting point is, honestly, just asking yourself what really resonated with you. What aspects of Finnish society really stood out to you? Was it that work-life balance thing?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a sign that you need to reevaluate your own priorities, make some adjustments.
Small changes, even.
Yeah, even small changes can make a big difference over time.
Like, I know I'm totally guilty of, working through lunch, not taking enough breaks.
Right.
Maybe that's something I need to work on.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be drastic.
Yeah.
Start small, build from there.
And Finland also reminds us that happiness isn't just about, individual effort, right? It's also about community, about having those social connections, that sense of trust that we talked about.
Yeah, that's a big one. And it's something that a lot of us, I think, are lacking these days.
So how do we build that? Especially in cultures where, individualism is so emphasized.
It's definitely a challenge. But I think it starts with small things, like getting to know your neighbors,
Yeah.
volunteering in your community, finding ways to connect with people who share your interests.
And maybe just, being more present in our interactions with people.
Right. Put down the phone, make eye contact, actually listen.
It's harder than it sounds these days.
It is, but it's so worth it.
Okay, and we have to talk about Sisu again.
Ah, yes. Sisu, one of my favorite concepts.
It's such a powerful idea, and I think it really speaks to that, inner strength that we all have.
The resilience.
Yeah, that ability to keep going even when things get tough.
And it's not about pretending that everything is fine or being overly optimistic.
Right. It's more about accepting reality.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging the challenges, but not letting them defeat you.
It's about finding that inner strength to keep moving forward.
And maybe even finding a little bit of humor along the way.
I love that, finding the humor, because I think that's part of being kind to ourselves too, right?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're all human, we all make mistakes, we all have our struggles.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's part of the journey.
But I think it's important to remember that, we're not trying to become Finland here.
Right. This isn't about copying them exactly.
It's about taking inspiration from their model, but adapting it to our own lives, our own cultures, our own values.
Exactly. Finland just offers a different perspective, a different way of thinking about well-being.
And that's valuable in itself.
It is. It shows us that there are other possibilities, other ways of structuring society, of living our lives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think a good question to leave our listeners with is, what one small change inspired by this Finnish model are you going to commit to making in your own life?
It doesn't have to be huge.
Even something tiny.
Just one thing that you can do to, bring a little bit of that Finnish wisdom into your own world.
Maybe it's spending more time in nature or prioritizing your relationships.
Or just being a little kinder to yourself.
The point is to take that first step.
And start building from there.
Because ultimately, the journey to happiness is ongoing.
It is.
It's not about reaching some final destination. It's about enjoying the ride.
And learning and growing along the way.
So thank you for joining us on this exploration of Finnish happiness.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep seeking those moments of joy and connection that make life truly fulfilling.